And John weighed 350 pounds. A health scare made him change everything. To Chapter 1. The alarm clock blared at 5:45 a.m., as it did every weekday. John Miller groaned, his large frame shifting uncomfortably under the sheets that seemed to grow smaller with each passing month. He reached over to silence the electronic disruption, his breathing already labored from the simple movement. At 47, weighing 350 pounds, even the most basic actions had become exhausting ordeals. "Another day," he muttered to himself, staring at the ceiling fan rotating lazily above his bed. The popcorn ceiling had become a familiar sight during his sleepless nights, when acid reflux and sleep apnea conspired to keep him awake. John's modest two-bedroom apartment in suburban Chicago was a testament to his solitary existence. In the kitchen, he mechanically prepared his usual breakfast: 4 slices of toast slathered with peanut butter and jelly, washed down with sweetened coffee. He ate, standing over the sink, avoiding the dining table cluttered with unopened mail and take-out containers from the previous night. His gaze drifted to a photo magnet on his refrigerator. A younger, still heavy but noticeably smaller John, smiling with his sister's family at a Cubs game. His nephew Tommy, just 8 in the photo, now played high school baseball. John had missed his last 3 games, always finding an excuse, ashamed of how winded he'd become just climbing the bleachers. "I'll make it to the next one," he promised himself, knowing the words rang hollow. The commute to Bradshaw Insurance, where John had worked as a claims adjuster for 19 years, was a painful reminder of his condition. His 2012 Toyota Camry seemed to sigh under his weight, the driver's seat permanently molded to his form. By the time he settled at his desk, sweat beaded on his forehead and dampened his shirt collar despite the office's aggressive air conditioning. "Morning, Miller," called Marcus from the neighboring cubicle. "Donut day? Grabbed you a couple chocolate glazed before they disappeared." "You're a lifesaver," John replied with forced cheerfulness, accepting the paper plate while ignoring the fleeting concern in his colleague's eyes. The morning crawled by in a haze of insurance claims and customer calls. John's desk drawer housed his survival kit: antacids for the perpetual heartburn, ibuprofen for his aching knees, and snacks for when hunger struck between meals. By lunchtime, his shirt felt tight across his chest, his breathing more labored than usual. "You all right, John?" asked Diane, the department supervisor, pausing by his desk. "You look a little pale." "Just busy," he assured her, forcing a smile, "trying to clear these backlogged claims before the weekend." When the others headed out for lunch, John ordered delivery from the Chinese restaurant down the block: General Tso's chicken, fried rice, and crab rangoons. Eating alone in his cubicle had become routine, a way to avoid the walking distance to nearby restaurants and the stares that followed him in public places. As afternoon wore on, a dull pressure began building in his chest. He'd felt similar discomfort before and attributed it to heartburn, popping 2 antacids and continuing with his work. But by 3 o'clock, the pressure had transformed into something more insistent, radiating down his left arm. "Probably nothing," he whispered, loosening his tie as sweat began dripping down his temples despite the cool office air. The pain intensified, crushing now, stealing his breath. When he tried to stand, the room tilted alarmingly. "John?" Marcus's voice sounded distant. "Jesus, man, you don't look good." "I think—" John couldn't finish the sentence. His knees buckled as the office blurred around him. The last thing he remembered was Marcus shouting for someone to call 911, and the strange, detached thought, so this is how it ends. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the emergency room greeted John when he regained consciousness. A steady beeping marked his heartbeat, wires connecting him to monitors, displaying numbers he didn't understand. An oxygen mask covered his face, and an IV line snaked into his arm. "Mr. Miller, you're awake." A doctor with tired eyes and salt and pepper hair approached his bedside. "I'm Dr. Reeves. You're at Northwestern Memorial. You've had what we call an acute coronary event. Not a full-blown heart attack, but a warning shot across the bow." John tried to speak, but the doctor raised a hand. "Rest for now. We've stabilized you, but we need to have a serious conversation about your health. At 47, with your BMI and current test results, you're on a dangerous path." This episode was a warning. The next one might not be. As John lay there, staring at the speckled ceiling tiles, the reality of his situation crystallized with devastating clarity. He wasn't living, he was slowly dying, one supersized meal at a time. For the first time in years, genuine fear gripped him. Not the vague anxiety that had become his constant companion, but stark terror at the prospect of his own mortality. Outside his hospital room, through the partially open door, he could hear his sister Helen's voice, breaking as she spoke to the doctor. "He's all Tommy and Emma have for an uncle. Please, what can we do?" In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by machines monitoring his fragile hold on life, John faced the consequences of thousands of small choices that had led him here. The fast food meals eaten in his car, the elevator taken instead of stairs, the weekends spent on the couch instead of moving his body, the emotional wounds he'd tried to soothe with food rather than healing properly. As tears slid silently down his face, fogging the oxygen mask, John made a promise to himself that felt different from his usual empty resolutions. If he got another chance, he would change everything. He had to. His life literally depended on it. Chapter 2. 3 days after his cardiac episode, John sat on the edge of his hospital bed, discharge papers in hand, staring at the business card Dr. Reeves had given him. Sarah Patel, nutritionist, it read in simple black typeface alongside a phone number and email address. "This isn't optional, John," Dr. Reeves had said firmly during their final consultation. "I've scheduled your first appointment with Sarah for Monday. I've also referred you to Dr. Wilson for cardiac rehabilitation and Dr. Chen for psychological support. This is a comprehensive approach. Your heart, your body, and your mind all need attention." Now home, John stood in his kitchen, the familiar territory suddenly feeling hostile. He opened his refrigerator and cupboards, seeing them through new eyes. The processed foods, the sugary snacks, the frozen meals high in sodium. With a garbage bag in hand, he began clearing out everything Dr. Reeves and the hospital nutritionist had advised against. By the time he finished, his kitchen was nearly empty. The garbage bags by his door represented more than discarded food. They symbolized the habits he needed to leave behind. The next morning, John woke before his alarm, an unusual occurrence. The gravity of his situation had made sleep elusive. He carefully followed the meal plan the hospital nutritionist had provided, a breakfast of oatmeal with berries and a side of egg whites. It felt inadequate compared to his usual morning feast, but he ate slowly, trying to appreciate the subtle flavors. Monday arrived with rain beating against John's windows. He'd taken 2 weeks of medical leave from work, time he needed to establish new patterns. The trip to Sarah Patel's office marked his first real outing since returning home. "The first thing we need to establish," Sarah said after introductions, "is that this isn't a diet. Diets fail because they're temporary. We're restructuring your relationship with food permanently." John shifted uncomfortably in the chair across from her desk, which creaked under his weight. "I've tried diets before. Lost weight, gained it back, plus more." Sarah nodded knowingly. "That's the cycle we're breaking. Tell me about your typical day with food, and be honest. This is a judgment-free zone." For the next hour, John revealed his eating habits, surprised at how emotional the conversation became. He described using food as comfort after his divorce 8 years ago, how drive-through meals became routine during long work hours, and how eating had become his primary source of pleasure. "Food filled the gaps," he admitted, voice thick. "When I felt lonely or stressed or bored, food was always there." "That's very insightful," Sarah replied. "Now we need to develop healthier coping mechanisms while changing your nutrition. Small, sustainable steps." She outlined a meal plan that seemed surprisingly generous. lean proteins, complex carbohydrates, vegetables, and even occasional treats. This isn't about deprivation, she explained. It's about nourishment and learning to enjoy real food again. As John left her office with a grocery list and meal suggestions, he felt a mix of determination and doubt. Could he really change decades of habits? The question haunted him as he navigated the unfamiliar territory of the grocery store's produce section. The following day brought another new experience, his first session with Dr. Chen, the psychologist. Many people focus solely on the physical aspects of weight loss, Dr. Chen said, his voice calm and measured. But emotional eating is powerful. We need to address why food became your coping mechanism. John struggled to articulate feelings he'd suppressed for years. I guess I've been disappointed in myself for a long time. Each failed attempt at changing just reinforced that I wasn't strong enough. Interesting choice of words. Strong enough, Dr. Chen noted. We often frame health changes as battles of willpower, but that's misleading. This is about healing, not fighting. Over the next week, John established a new routine. Mornings began with a short walk around his neighborhood, just to the end of the block and back at first, his chest tight and legs aching with the unaccustomed effort. He prepared simple meals following Sarah's guidelines, discovering vegetables he'd never tried before. Evenings included relaxation techniques Dr. Chen had suggested to replace emotional eating. The changes weren't without challenges. On Friday night, after a particularly difficult therapy session exploring his divorce, the craving for his usual comfort foods became overwhelming. John found himself in his car, driving toward McDonald's before consciously recognizing what he was doing. He pulled into the parking lot, the golden arches illuminated against the darkening sky, the familiar smell of fryer oil wafting through his open window. His hand reached for the door handle, then stopped. John sat there, engine idling, as a war raged within him. The comfort of familiar food against the sterile hospital room, the momentary pleasure against the crushing chest pain, the easy choice against the right one. With trembling hands, he put the car in reverse and drove home, tears streaming down his face. That night, he called his sister Helen for the first time in months. "I almost failed today," he admitted, after explaining his week. "But you didn't," Helen replied, her voice warm with pride. "That's what matters, John. And next time it will be a little easier." By the end of his second week, John had lost 11 pounds. It wasn't dramatic, but standing on the scale at Sarah's office, he felt a flicker of accomplishment. "Good progress," Sarah said, "but remember, this isn't just about the number. How are you feeling?" John considered the question. "My knees hurt less. I'm sleeping better. And yesterday I walked all the way around the block without stopping." Small victories, but they were his. When he returned to work the following Monday, the concerned glances from colleagues reminded him of how close he'd come to disaster. Marcus stopped by his desk after lunch, eyeing the container of homemade chicken salad John had brought from home. "You're really doing this, huh?" Marcus asked, a mix of surprise and respect in his voice. "No choice," John replied, but then corrected himself. "Actually, that's not true. I'm choosing this every day." That night, looking at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, John barely recognized the determination in his own eyes. The physical changes were still subtle, his face perhaps slightly less puffy, his shirt marginally looser, but something fundamental had shifted inside him. For the first time in years, he felt hope, fragile and tentative, but unmistakably present. Chapter 3. 3 months into John's transformation journey, Chicago's summer heat settled over the city like a heavy blanket. In his apartment, John carefully packed his gym bag for his thrice-weekly session at the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center, a routine that had become a cornerstone of his new life. The scale that morning had shown 298 pounds, the first time he'd been under 300 in nearly 7 years. Though still obese by medical standards, the 52-pound loss represented countless small victories and difficult choices. "Looking good, Mr. Miller," said Tracy, the cardiac rehabilitation specialist, as John completed his walking session on the treadmill. Your heart rate recovery is improving consistently. Remember when you could barely do 5 minutes at this pace? John nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. The rehabilitation center had initially intimidated him with its medical equipment and fitter patrons, but he'd found unexpected camaraderie among the other cardiac patients, people of various ages and backgrounds united by their second chances. "How's the new medication working out?" Tracy asked as she recorded his vitals. "Better than the first one," John replied. "Less dizziness, though I still get tired in the afternoons." "That might be as much about your increased activity as the medication," she suggested. "You're asking a lot more of your body these days." After finishing his prescribed exercises, John checked his phone to find a text from his nephew Tommy. "Game at 4. Will you make it?" John had been avoiding this moment, still self-conscious about his size despite his progress. But he'd promised himself to stop putting life on hold until he reached some arbitrary goal weight. "I'll be there," he texted back, his stomach tightening with anxiety. The high school baseball field was crowded when John arrived, parents and students filling the aluminum bleachers. He hesitated at the entrance, scanning for his sister. "Uncle John!" The voice came from behind him. Tommy jogged over, already in his uniform, his face lighting up with surprise. "You actually came." "Said I would, didn't I?" John managed, touched by his nephew's reaction. "You look different," Tommy said, studying him. "Good different." The simple observation from the teenager meant more than all the polite comments from co-workers. John felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks, kid. Now go warm up. I'll find your mum." Climbing the bleachers remained challenging, but John moved with deliberate determination, ignoring the familiar burning in his thighs. Helen waved from the middle section, her smile widening as he approached. "John!" She made room beside her. "I was hoping you'd come. Tommy's been talking about it all week." "Has he?" John settled onto the bench, relieved it didn't creak under his still substantial weight. "Of course. You're his favorite uncle." "I'm his only uncle," John pointed out. Helen's expression softened. "That doesn't make it any less true." As the game progressed, John found himself genuinely engaged, cheering Tommy's plays and chatting with Helen about family matters he'd been too isolated to follow. When Tommy hit a double in the 7th inning, John leapt to his feet with the other spectators, shouting encouragement without a thought for who might be watching him. "We usually get ice cream after games," Helen mentioned as the teams shook hands following Tommy's team's narrow victory. "Would you join us?" The old John would have refused, using work as an excuse. The new John hesitated for different reasons. Ice cream wasn't on his meal plan. "But Dr. Chen's words echoed in his mind. "Health includes social connections. Sometimes the emotional nourishment of being with loved ones outweighs strict adherence to food rules." "I'd like that," John decided. "Maybe a small cup instead of my old triple-scoop waffle cone." At the ice cream parlor, John ordered a single scoop of vanilla in a cup, while Tommy regaled him with details about baseball recruiters and college prospects. John realized with a pang how much he'd missed by retreating from family gatherings. "You should come to Emma's recital next month," Helen suggested as they finished their treats. "She's playing cello in the school orchestra." "I'd like that," John said, and meant it. The following week brought a new challenge when Marcus organized a birthday lunch for their department supervisor at an Italian restaurant. The old John would have ordered fettuccine alfredo with garlic bread, followed by tiramisu. The new John studied the menu anxiously, looking for options that wouldn't derail his progress. "Grilled chicken over greens," he told the waiter when his turn came. "Dressing on the side, please." "No pasta?" Marcus asked, eyebrows raised. "That's like going to Italy and not seeing the Colosseum." "I'll have pasta again someday," John replied, "just not today." As the lunch progressed, John noticed something unexpected. Freed from focusing on food, he participated more in the conversation, even making a few jokes that had the table laughing. Diane, the supervisor, pulled him aside as they were leaving. "It's good to have you back, John," she said, "and I don't just mean after your health scare. You seem more present now." Her observation stayed with him throughout the afternoon. Had he been so absent in his own life? The evidence suggested yes. Food had been both his comfort and his hiding place, allowing him to avoid meaningful connections and challenging emotions. That evening, after finishing his planned dinner and logging it in the food tracking app Sarah had recommended, John found himself restless. Without the ritual of ordering takeout and eating until drowsy, his evenings felt strangely empty. Dr. Chen had encouraged him to explore new interests to fill the space once occupied by emotional eating. On impulse, John opened his laptop and searched for local volunteer opportunities. A listing for a literacy program at the public library caught his attention. They needed adults to read with children after school hours. Before he could overthink it, he filled out the application form. 2 days later, the program coordinator called to schedule his orientation. "We're especially in need of male readers," she explained. "Many of our kids don't have male role models who read regularly." The thought of being a role model to anyone would have seemed laughable to John 6 months earlier. Now it felt like a responsibility he wanted to shoulder. At his next therapy session, he shared the development with Dr. Chen. "That's significant progress," the psychologist noted. "You're not just changing what you eat or how you move, you're changing how you engage with the world." "I still have bad days," John admitted. "Last week, after a stressful meeting, I ate an entire bag of popcorn in one sitting, then felt guilty for hours." "Perfection isn't the goal," Dr. Chen reminded him. "Awareness is. You notice the behavior and its trigger. That's growth." As summer transitioned to fall, John continued his methodical transformation. His wardrobe required updating as his clothes became increasingly baggy. Shopping remained uncomfortable, but he allowed himself to feel a measure of pride when he purchased pants 2 sizes smaller than his previous ones. One Saturday morning in early October, John was startled by a knock at his apartment door. He opened it to find Tommy standing in the hallway, holding a baseball glove. "Mom said you're walking at the park on Saturdays now," the teenager said. "Thought maybe you could use some company. Maybe throw the ball around after." John felt an unexpected surge of emotion. "I'd like that," he managed, reaching for his jacket. "I'm not very fast yet." "That's cool," Tommy shrugged. "I'm not in a hurry." As they walked the park path together, John at his slow but steady pace, and Tommy easily matching it, John realized he'd been given exactly what he'd feared losing forever: a second chance to be present in his own life and in the lives of those who mattered most. Chapter 4. Winter descended on Chicago with characteristic ferocity, bringing biting winds off Lake Michigan and snowdrifts that transformed the city landscape. For John, now approaching the 1-year anniversary of his cardiac episode, the changing season brought new challenges to his continuing transformation. His morning walks, once conducted in pleasant summer air, now required layers of clothing and careful navigation of icy sidewalks. The gym became more crowded as outdoor exercise options diminished, and holiday celebrations loomed ahead with their traditions centered around food and drink. The average American gains 5 to 7 pounds between Thanksgiving and New Year's, Sarah warned during their now monthly nutrition check-in. "For someone with your history, this season requires extra vigilance." John nodded, understanding the concern. At 263 pounds, 87 pounds lighter than his starting weight, he'd made remarkable progress, but still had significant work ahead to reach a truly healthy weight for his frame. "I've been thinking about my strategies," he told her. "For the office party, I'll eat beforehand and focus on socializing. For family gatherings, I'll bring healthy dishes I can enjoy safely." Sarah smiled approvingly. "You're not just following guidelines anymore. You're creating your own solutions." And this evolution from passive recipient of expert advice to active manager of his own health journey represented one of the most profound changes in John's life. The man who once mindlessly consumed whatever provided immediate comfort now planned meals days in advance, read nutritional labels with discernment, and recognized emotional triggers for unhealthy eating before they overwhelmed him. The physical changes had become impossible to ignore. His face, once round and flushed, had developed definition around the cheekbones and jaw. His wedding ring, long ago relegated to his dresser drawer when his fingers grew too swollen to wear it, now fit loosely on his ring finger, a bittersweet reminder of what he'd lost through years of self-neglect. At work, his transformation had not gone unnoticed. Younger colleagues occasionally sought his advice on health matters, a development that still amused and slightly embarrassed him. "Don't make me the poster boy for wellness," he protested to Marcus after being asked for restaurant recommendations by an intern. "I'm still figuring this out every day." "That's exactly why people ask you," Marcus pointed out. "You're real about it. Not some fitness influencer with perfect abs and a protein shake sponsorship." The office Christmas party in mid-December became an unexpected milestone. John arrived having already eaten a sensible dinner at home, planning to enjoy just one glass of wine and focus on conversation rather than the elaborate buffet. "John Miller, is that you?" The voice belonged to Carla from accounting, who'd been on maternity leave during the most dramatic months of his transformation. "I almost didn't recognize you." "Still me," John replied, smiling despite his discomfort with the attention. "Just a bit less of me these days." "You look amazing," she continued. "What's your secret?" The question was common, and one John had learned to navigate carefully. People often sought a simple answer, a particular diet, a miracle supplement, a specific exercise routine. The truth was far more complex. "No real secret," he said, "just a health scare that scared me straight, good medical support, and taking it one day at a time for about a year now." "A whole year?" Carla looked surprised. "I don't think I've ever stuck with anything that long." "Neither had I," John admitted, "until my life literally depended on it." Later that evening, Diane pulled him aside near the office Christmas tree. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something," she said, her expression serious. "The regional manager position is opening up in March. I think you should apply." John blinked in surprise. "Me? Management?" "You've always had the technical skills," Diane said. "But this past year, you've developed something equally important, resilience and people skills. The team respects you, John. They've watched you transform yourself through sheer determination." The suggestion lingered in John's mind throughout the holiday season. As he helped Tommy shop for a new baseball glove, college scouts are coming in spring, Uncle John, and attended Emma's winter orchestra concert, he found himself contemplating possibilities that would have seemed absurd a year earlier. Christmas Eve brought a gathering at Helen's house, where John faced the ultimate test of his new lifestyle. His sister's legendary cooking, including all the comfort foods of their childhood. "I made a few modifications this year," Helen told him quietly as they set the table together. "The mashed potatoes have cauliflower mixed in. The green bean casserole uses low-sodium soup. Small changes, but I thought they might help." John felt a rush of gratitude for his sister's thoughtfulness. "You didn't have to do that. Family supports each other," she replied simply. "You've done the hard work. The least I can do is not make it harder." During dinner, John allowed himself modest portions of traditional foods, savoring each bite mindfully rather than eating to the point of discomfort as he once would have. When Tommy teased him about taking seconds of Brussels sprouts, John laughed along, comfortable enough now to joke about his changed habits. After the meal, as the family gathered in the living room for their gift exchange, John noticed Emma watching him thoughtfully. "What's on your mind, kiddo?" he asked his niece. "I have a biology project about lifestyle changes," the 15-year-old said. "I was wondering if I could interview you about your experience." "For science." "For science, huh?" John smiled. "Sure, I'd be honored." "Cool, I'll need before and after pictures too." John hesitated. He'd avoided photos for years before his health crisis and had few recent ones that documented his progress. "I'll find something," he promised, touched by his niece's interest in his journey. New Year's Eve arrived with a snowstorm that blanketed the city in white. John had declined several party invitations, opting instead for a quiet evening of reflection. Sitting by his apartment window, watching snowflakes swirl under streetlights, He contemplated the dramatic arc of his past year. The physical statistics were impressive enough. 87 pounds lost, blood pressure normalized, sleep apnea resolved, medications reduced. But the numbers couldn't capture the more profound transformations. Reconnecting with family, developing new friendships at the Cardiac Rehab Center and Library Volunteer Program, and rediscovering parts of himself long buried under layers of fat and shame. His phone chimed with a text message from Dr. Reeves. 1 year ago tonight, you made a decision to live differently. Proud of your progress. Happy New Year. The simple acknowledgement from the doctor who had delivered his wake-up call brought unexpected tears to John's eyes. He remembered the fear in that hospital room, the certainty that he had squandered his health beyond recovery. John rose from his chair and retrieved a small box from his bedroom dresser. Inside lay the belt he'd worn on the day of his cardiac episode, now much too large for his reduced waistline. He'd kept it as a tangible reminder of how far he'd come and how easily he could return to that dangerous place if he abandoned his new patterns. His phone chimed again, a video call from Helen's house where his sister was hosting a small gathering. 10 minutes to midnight, Tommy announced when John answered. We wanted you on the call for the countdown. The screen filled with familiar faces, Helen, Tommy, Emma, and a few family friends, all wearing novelty 2025 glasses and waving noisemakers. You should be here, Uncle John, Emma called. Mom made healthy snacks and everything. Next year, John promised. I'm enjoying the quiet tonight. As the group began the countdown to midnight, John joined in from his apartment, his voice blending with theirs across the digital connection. When the clock struck 12 and cheers erupted, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over him. One full trip around the sun since his life had changed course. 1 year of difficult choices, setbacks, victories, sweat, tears, and gradual healing. Not a miraculous transformation, but a methodical reconstruction of himself, one decision at a time. After ending the call with promises to visit soon, John stood before the full-length mirror in his bedroom. He still didn't see a thin man reflected back. His body bore the loose skin and stretch marks that testified to years of obesity, but he recognized something in his eyes that had been absent for too long. Purpose, determination, and a quiet dignity. The journey wasn't over. It would never truly be over. Health wasn't a destination but a direction, requiring daily recommitment. There would be future struggles, plateaus, temptations, and the constant pull of old habits. But John had discovered something more powerful than willpower or fear, the realization that he was worth the effort. In the peaceful quiet of the year's first moments, John made no grandiose resolutions. Instead, he renewed the simple promise that had carried him through 365 transformative days to make choices that honored his body, his health, and his future, one moment at a time. Tomorrow would bring a New Year's first sunrise, new challenges, and new opportunities. John Miller, lighter in body, stronger in resolve, and reconnected to what mattered most, was ready to meet them all.